Welcome to the Psych 101 podcast. I'm your host, Luke Maxwell, and today I am so happy to talk with Erez Shek. Erez, how are you doing? So glad to have you on.
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic, thank you. So, Erez, let's get into it. Let's not waste time. How did you get involved in mental health advocacy?
As I was seeking my own. No, there wasn't like a defining moment where an aha moment where I was like, I'm going to be a mental health advocate. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder close to 16 years ago.
Okay. And how old were you at that time?
I was 21.
Okay. Thank you.
So I had years of kind of being misdiagnosed before then. And, but I think it took me actually a long time to fully actually come to terms with everything that living with bipolar is. Right. And September 5th, 2016, I tried to end my life. And I woke up 2 days later in the hospital, and I was then 5150'd, which if people don't know, that's when legally you have to, they're putting you in a psych ward for your own safety, but it doesn't feel like that at the time for you.
Right.
And it was actually in the where I was 5150 that I kind of started this journey of understanding what my mental health is, and also the stigma of mental illness, and how much that actually took me to where I was when I tried to end my life. And I kind of saw it in the hospital from the nurses and from the interns and all those people there. And I saw how it kind of affected other people, other patients in there who were dealing with a schizoaffective disorder or depression or something alcohol related or anxiety or any, run down the list of any mental health issue or mental illness. And I started seeing stigma in kind of everybody's eyes. And after I got out, I just decided that, I was going to do something to contribute to end that, and since then, it's been over a year now. It's kind of grown for me in the sense that I'm also allowing myself to grow with it. And I'm understanding the difference between educating about mental illness and ending the stigma through education, and also the work that our mental health takes us. And so I kind of think I'm doing all of it because I didn't want to just be focused on one thing, because that's not realistic to me.
Right. And thank you. Yes. I mean, I love hearing these stories of, there's something bad that happened in your life, but you didn't let it sit there. You didn't just say, something bad happened in my life. You said something bad happened. I'm going to make something good out of it. And what made you make that decision? Was there something that just kind of twisted your perspective? Was there something that just kind of made you go, I need to do something? Or was it more of a gradual realization?
It's weird. It was gradual, but it was a very fast gradual. But it was also literally immediately after and during when I was in the hospital after the suicide attempt. It was seeing more than just me suffering from what stigma can do. And then after I got out of the hospital, speaking with my psychiatrist and my therapist, and kind of going back and starting to look at everything leading up to it, I saw how much it had affected me. And it was literally maybe over a week or 2 weeks afterwards that I was like, I want to talk to people. I want number one, people to understand that they don't have to do this. They don't have to get to that place. I understand how we get to that place where we want to end our lives. I understood it. I understood it too well. And I understood how seeing other people and hearing other people's stories of that can help us move forward. And it really is like, I actually say this at the end of all my Shek Check videos, which is, we can't help others if we're not helping ourselves. And at the same time, helping ourselves is helping others.
I'm so glad that you said that, because that's something I've been saying for a while now, and I feel like people don't believe me when I say
They don't get it. Yeah, they're like, no, wait. They'll like try to correct you. They're like, that's not what you meant. That's not what you meant. And you're like, no, that's what I meant. You,
Yes,
yeah,
and I'm so glad to hear other people saying that, because when you say when I tell people that, like, to their face, I'll
yeah,
say helping yourself is helping other people, and they'll go, "Oh, well,
right,
you no, you don't know my situation. Like, no, I really need." No. Like, listen to me. Trust me.
yeah,
I've been where you are. I knew I needed to help myself before anything else. So
right.
I'm always glad to get more affirmation from people who've been in the situation and know what you need to do in order to get help. So, what are you doing now? You have this story, you have this, drive to help others. So, what occupies your time now? What are you doing now to help others with their mental health challenges?
Well, number one, I'm helping myself. No, but it's funny, but it's funny because it's true.
Right.
Because as
Exactly.
I think one thing that like always gets confused um, is that there are people that are living with a mental illness, and not everybody in this world has a mental illness. Everybody in this world does have their mental health to take care of, and
Mhm.
just because I've gotten to a place where I'm more stable with my bipolar disorder or whatever, I have like years of not being stable and moments of stability that I kind of ignored because it was easier for me to feel like I was sick than to actually go and
Right.
do things in my life and take care and actually be taking care of myself. Um, so now
Mhm.
for me, it's what I'm doing is I'm in therapy and working on my mental health and my growth and taking care of my
Good.
bipolar
Good.
disorder. I'm putting it out on my Shek Check videos, which is the videos of the Shek Check, which is a website www.theshekcheck.com. Little plug there.
Mhm.
Um, um, I'm kind of in a way documenting what I'm learning about myself and what's helping me along with my journey. So I do my videos. I'm fond of making memes and putting them out there of the things I'm learning. And I'm talking. I'm talking
Right.
about things I've gone through because my life, is not just made up of bipolar disorder. There's, you know, nobody is their illness. So, and there are events in our life that form us, and for good and bad. And there are things that we need to work on. So I try my best to kind of put them out there with as much transparency with others as I am working on being with myself. So by doing that, I kind of think,
Wow. And yeah,
I'm working on that, and I'm also working on a memoir about my life to kind of talk about my journey.
nice. That's so great. And I've seen some of your videos. I've looked at your website, and one really interests me is a very strong title, and it was called "The Stigma Kills." Want to tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about that? Because you've mentioned it before when you're in the psych ward talking about the
yeah,
stigma. This is huge. I mean, this is the reason, right? I think you can agree with me that many people don't get help, and many people don't realize that they need help is because the stigma is so big that the awareness isn't out there and they're ashamed and afraid to say
yeah.
anything. So, can you tell us a little bit about your experiences with the stigma and what led you to create that video, and kind of like what's your take on the stigma?
Right. I think there's so many different levels to stigma,
Mhm.
and it affects so many different parts of people's lives without even knowing it. And you're absolutely correct. It prevents people from talking about it. It prevents people from going and getting the help that they
Yeah.
need. On another side of it as well, there's so many things that keeps us quiet because of it. And
Mhm.
this actually extends far beyond like just mental illness. This, has to do with sexual abuse and, and again, with mental health, eating disorders and all of that stuff. My experience is that because stigma is essentially discrimination, right? It's
Mhm.
discrimination um, and ignorance. People just don't, and I don't mean ignorance in like in an accusatory way. It's like if you
Of
don't
course.
learn about
Of course.
something and you're going off maybe what you've seen in the movies or what you've read in a
Mhm.
magazine or just what you've heard from the society that you grow up in and so forth. There's there's an ignorance when it comes to like the education and the interpretation or the misinterpretations of mental health and mental illness. And
Yep.
for me, it was something I, have, it's something that I've struggled with since I was diagnosed. And it wasn't just the people who didn't know about mental illness or the ones who, who said, oh, you're depressed, so don't go to therapy, don't take medication, drink this herbal tea, and take these vitamins and think
Yep.
positive
Yep.
thinking and positive thoughts, and you'll be fine. And it's like even those little things that
Yep.
we might view as like, come on, that's not a big deal. It actually is something that is extremely stigmatizing and actually quite upsetting within like people living with mental illness, because it takes away the legitimacy of what a mental illness is. We talk often about, physical illness is not being, or mental illness is not taken as seriously in society and communities as physical illness.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
and I totally agree with you. And it's funny that I never you said something that's very interesting. You said the stigma is discrimination. I never thought about it like that, and it's such an interesting way to phrase it, and a great way I think to relate it to something that's especially very topical in every regard, like in every way. But roping is like, hey, people with mental illness, they're discriminated against as well with society. Very interesting. I'm glad you brought. I've never thought about it like that.
We think discrimination and we think, oh, don't use
Mhm.
that bathroom, or in that kind of sense. There are people that are affected by this in the workplace. They can't talk about it. They can't be open
Mhm.
about it. Um, there's fear, and not just in America, in other countries
Right.
as well. But we don't
Right.
talk about like the discriminatory ways that people may speak to you or treat you when they hear that you have a mental illness. And that's kind of what I dealt with the most, that even though there were people around me who understood, um, who understood maybe like textbook definitions of bipolar
Mhm.
disorder and mental health or mental illness, the problem I kind of faced with that is everything they read in those textbooks became applicable to me. So if they even saw like a tiny bit of
Yeah.
it was the
Yeah.
bipolar. And over time, it just became that Erez is bipolar.
Mhm.
And I'm not. I live with bipolar
Right.
disorder. I'm Erez. But what kind of happened over a period of time was you believe that about yourself and you lose yourself to it.
Yes.
And it affects, the stigma affects other people in so many different ways. And but the video Stigma Kills was actually talking in detail about what led me to end my life. And the assumption was that, oh, my medication was off for for the bipolar,
Mhm.
or I was having an episode of mania or bipolar depression. And when it came down to it, it was actually just what you would call a situational depression. I was depressed from my life situation, and in many ways, I had lost myself to the stigma of bipolar disorder. And when you
Mhm.
lose yourself, you don't really feel like there's anything else to live for.
Right. Oh yes, definitely. And you know what? I
Good.
think we're gonna do some stigma breaking right now. Can you inform us what bipolar is? Plain and simple, tell us what it is, what it looks like, how it presented in your own life. That way we can understand, we can empathize with people who have it, and we can just be better human beings for it.
Right. Well, something I actually talk about this in one of my videos is that, like everybody's bipolar disorder, there's going to be there's going to be tons of similarities in people's bipolar disorders, right? But
Mhm.
when it comes
Mhm.
down to it, everybody experiences their mania or their depression, or their hypomania, and their onsets maybe just a bit slightly different. And I think that's important to know, because again, it goes back to this, like, nobody is exactly the same. Nobody's a textbook
Right.
definition. Now, with bipolar disorder, what it comes down to is it speaks almost precisely. It's kind of going back and forth between polar opposites. It's a chemical imbalance in your brain, and if you're
Mhm.
during an episode, you're kind of either manic, which for me presents itself as extremely hazy, and but like in a kind of, I go in and out of like blackouts kind of way. Like I might be walking around, but
Mm-hmm.
I might not remember certain things. Your mind is kind of going, or my mind goes like
Mm-hmm.
a mile a minute. I talk more than I usually do, and I talk a lot as is. And there's hypersexuality that often does not get talked about because it's kind of nobody wants to hear about that. Some people spend a lot
Right.
of money. If they have a lot of money, there are people that have gone into debt because of it. And for me, a lot of it is I've I've definitely put some strain on relationships because of the erraticness that it has caused within me. And then the depression for me is very much like what
Mm-hmm.
it's very much like what you see in the movies. I typically feel
Right.
extremely heavy, and getting out of bed is extremely. It seems very unplausible, and it also something to note is that you don't you. It sounds so scary, but you don't often know what you know you don't feel like you have control in any sense. And that's what, for me, that's why I embrace medication as
Mm-hmm.
well,
Right.
legally. And, um,
Mm-hmm.
and hypermania, which is often present for me during onset of an episode, is kind of just like a shorter version of mania. The thing is hypomania for me can actually happen with or without an
Okay.
episode that follows. Um, yeah. So, and then, different kind of things for me
Okay.
for onset of an episode besides the hypomania is I do kind of notice things kind of going a little faster in my brain, like not necessarily my speech,
Mm-hmm.
but when other people are speaking, it seems like the world's going a little faster. I actually always say that it's important for people living with bipolar disorder to start looking back at past
Okay.
episodes that they've had and start getting to know like the traits of your episodes of your mania and your depression, because it is actually helping you. And if you're going to a
Okay.
therapist, it
Mm-hmm.
helps them as well. And I actually I once wrote it up on a piece of paper, and when I was kind of living far away from family, I gave it to them, and I said, if you start noticing these things, I'm giving you permission to call my therapist, because that's basically self care in my eyes. Getting to know those things are self care, because you don't want to end up in an episode,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it's kind of important to have those buffers there.
Mm-hmm. I am so, and thank you. Thank you. You've explained it right. And even in for me, some things that I didn't know. And I'm sure that anybody who didn't know what bipolar disorder is now knows. And I'm so, and I
Yep.
love the fact that you wrote down your
Yeah.
signs, your symptoms, the traits that you experience when you're going into an episode. Piece of paper, which I love pen and paper, and then you gave it to somebody so they could help you. And that right there shows me how much, like, where you've gone from
Yeah.
being like severely affected like by the stigma to now you're asking for help, which is, I mean, I don't know, I know in my case that when I was afraid and ashamed like of saying something, never would have done that. Because I don't like having problems, and I don't want, like, I naturally just don't want people to, like, to know my problems. I just naturally, I don't want to talk about them. So I love that. I think that's a great example. And the fact that you are here, doing well, like, of course, you're going to therapy, which is also great. I think every person in the world needs therapy, even people who seem mentally healthy. And you're taking care of yourself. I do. I believe that every person in the world could benefit from therapy at least once a month because we all
I
have
think if a
problems.
doctor,
I'm sorry.
I think if you go to a doctor,
Mm.
like a regular physician, you should be going to a therapist as well,
Yes. Yes.
because that, I think that's actually one of the greatest like I call it actually the mother stigma,
Hmm.
is that we when we hear mental health, we I think as a society we hear mental illness, and so we think,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we don't have to hear that because I don't live with a mental illness, I don't have a mental
Yeah.
illness.
Yeah.
And the thing is if you're paying attention to your physical health, and your physical well-being, pay some attention to your mental health as well, because everybody has to deal with our mental health as much as we all have to deal with our physical health.
Yes, and yes again. It is, and it's true.
Yes.
I mean, even the Romans. I loved
Yeah.
pointing this out. It was like the Romans had a phrase. I can't remember the Latin for it, but they said a strong mind is a strong body, and vice versa, because they're so connected. You're not yourself if either one of them is broken in any way. And I'll tell people, many people will tell me, well, I'm not sure if I'm dealing with clinical depression, because I don't know if my symptoms are serious enough. I say, you have symptoms. Let's not focus on whether you're depressed or not. Let's focus on what your symptoms are. Okay, you can't sleep at night. What can you do to sleep better at night?
You're absolutely correct. It's like that's an excellent. Number one, nobody should ever self-diagnose themselves, no matter how much you've read or anything. It's like, look at the symptoms, not the diagnosis. Look at what you're dealing with, and not at what it could necessarily be. And I actually see this with people, or who live with a mental illness, like a diagnosed mental illness. Currently, it's like, not that we want to add things onto our list of diagnoses, but it's like, we should know better than anybody that you go to a doctor to get diagnosed, right? So don't think that if you read something on Google, or you picked up a book and you're like, oh, that person has hypothermia. I'm cold. I have hypothermia. No, you wouldn't do that. So don't do it with depression. Don't do it with anxiety. Let's not call things diagnose things that they're not, until we know from a doctor. You're exactly right. We should be looking at the symptoms, what we're feeling, and what we're going through in life first, because that's what actually.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Always consult the professionals. Yep. Exactly. I always say, I am not a doctor. You need to go to a doctor. I can't tell you whether you have depression or not. I would love to heal you. I would love to just heal you, but I can't. You need professional help. And then, that goes back to the whole getting help and the stigma and everything with that.
I didn't go that far. I didn't get a master's or a doctorate.
Right. Me neither.
Last time I checked, you pick that up on Google, and if it's a real concern, go to a doctor. Yeah.
Exactly.
But in general, even, I think we need to be looking at the things that could potentially be causing it. And that, and the actual things, and take it from there. You can't treat an illness you either don't have or that you haven't been diagnosed with. It's not going to do you good to name it. Until you actually go see a professional about it.
Right. And with that, let's leave everybody with one thing they can do, right now. Maybe tonight, or maybe after they get home if they're driving. But one thing they can do to improve their mental health.
I think one thing that definitely people can do to improve their mental health, and something that I've kind of embraced, is every day try to write down one thing. It doesn't have to be a whole journal entry. Just one thing that you've had trouble admitting to yourself about either emotions or relationships in your life or events in your life. Just one word, one sentence that is just, nobody has to see it, bluntly honest with yourself.
Wow.
It's hard for you to admit.
Yes. Wow. That is original. I was not expecting that. Yes. So write down. Yep. Exactly. And really, to help you get, whether it's something in your past that you're not really feeling, don't really want to acknowledge, just something, get that out, because getting something out can go so far, getting it out into the light, because depression and all bad stuff feeds on darkness. And we get that outright, breaking the stigma. I'm feeling that's a little theme, the theme of our show right now, breaking that stigma, getting it out, whether it's especially on paper, in a private diary, or with your friends, asking for help, or with a therapist, actually getting professional help, break the stigma. And if you know somebody who maybe exhibits the signs of bipolar, talk to them. Educate, let them know what bipolar is, point them towards Erez here, and they can find his info at the Shek. It's and then SHEKCHECK.com, the Shek, got it that time.com. A ton of info there, and great on social media. In fact, we met on Twitter. One night I was just scrolling through. I don't know even if I told you this. I was scrolling through. I just typed in mental illness or mental health in the search bar.
My name came up. That concerns me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of your posts came up, and I thought this guy's pretty cool. He's posting some good stuff, and so I looked at your profile. I liked it, and then we started interacting through Twitter. We matched back and forth and got something set up. So again, proving social media is not all bad. There's a lot of good about social media as well. Thank you so much, Erez, for being on the show, helping us break the stigma around bipolar disorder. You can find show notes and more at the psych101podcast.com. All the links to everything about Erez will be there. His Twitter, where we met, his website. And just thank you so much, Erez. And thank you so much for sharing your story, your wisdom with us. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. You've been listening to the Psych 101 podcast. I'm Luke Maxwell with Erez Shek. Again, take a look at the show notes at the psych101podcast.com. Links to everything we talked about will be there. And as always, be unashamed and stay unashamed.